The cabin of Flight 782 buzzed softly with the usual pre-takeoff noises, luggage thumping into overhead bins, seatbelts clicking, flight attendants greeting passengers with practiced smiles. In the middle of all this routine movement, Steven Seagal quietly stepped into the aisle, wearing a black jacket, sunglasses, and a calm expression. He moved slowly and deliberately, the way only a seasoned martial artist would. But to most passengers, he looked like just another traveler trying to get to his seat without bumping into anyone. Steven didn't draw attention to himself. He placed his small carry-on bag under the seat, nodded politely at the flight attendant, and settled in. He enjoyed flights. They gave him time to breathe, stay silent, and observe the world without being part of it. But that peaceful moment didn't last long. A loud, irritated voice echoed from 4 rows ahead. "Move. That's my space. Do you even know how to put a bag properly?" A man barked at a flight attendant. Several passengers turned. The man was tall, red-faced, already sweating though the cabin was cool. He shoved his backpack aggressively into the overhead bin, muttering curses under his breath. The attendant tried calming him. "Sir, please lower your voice." "Oh, shut up," he snapped, waving her off. "I paid for this seat. I'll do whatever I want." Steven watched quietly, expression unreadable. Moments later, the same man started stomping down the aisle, looking for his seat number. Passengers shrank back into their seats to avoid brushing against him. But when he reached Steven's row, he carelessly swung his arm and smacked Steven's shoulder while squeezing through. "Watch where you're sitting," the man grumbled. Steven didn't react. He simply lifted his head and said softly, "It's okay. You're fine." But the man wasn't fine. He stopped, turned around, and glared at Steven like he had been personally offended by the calm response. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. "Don't get smart with me." Several heads turned. A young woman across the aisle whispered, "Oh no, here we go." Steven kept his voice steady. "I meant no disrespect. Please, go ahead." But the rude passenger folded his arms, puffing his chest. He had no idea who he was trying to intimidate, and no idea what was about to happen on this flight. The cabin door closed with a soft thud, and the airplane shifted slightly as it prepared to push back from the gate. Most passengers settled into their seats, adjusting pillows, opening magazines, or plugging in headphones. Everyone wanted a quiet flight. Everyone except him. The rude passenger from earlier, a man named Carl, according to the boarding manifest tucked into his pocket, continued grumbling under his breath as he tried to shove his oversized luggage under the seat. His movements were jerky, impatient, and loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "Stupid airline, stupid rules, stupid people," he muttered, slamming his knee against the tray table. A few passengers flinched. A flight attendant approached gently. "Sir, please take your seat. We're about to take off, and the aisle needs to stay clear." Carl rolled his eyes dramatically. "Can't you see I'm trying? Or do you need glasses?" The attendant held her composure. "I'm only reminding you of safety protocols, sir." "Oh, safety protocols," he mocked loudly. "As if you know anything about safety." At this point, several people exchanged uneasy glances. Parents pulled their children closer. No one wanted to be stuck thousands of feet in the air with a man like this. Steven Seagal, who had been silent, simply observed the situation. His breathing remained calm. His posture relaxed. But his eyes, sharp and disciplined, tracked the man's every move. He wasn't looking for trouble, but he recognized danger when it appeared. And it was appearing. Carl suddenly turned around again, noticing Steven looking in his direction. "What are you looking at?" Carl snapped. "You got a problem with me?" Steven blinked slowly. "No problem." "Oh, I think you do." Carl pointed aggressively. "You keep looking at me like you're judging me." Steven leaned back against his seat. "I'm not judging you. I'm just sitting here." Carl laughed sarcastically. "Yeah, right. That tone says everything. I'm just sitting." He mimicked Steven's voice in an exaggerated, childish manner, drawing uncomfortable stares from passengers. The flight attendant tried again. Sir, please sit down. You're disturbing the passengers. What passengers? Carl barked. These people, they're sheep. They don't get to tell me how to behave. Stephen inhaled deeply through his nose, the way martial artists do to keep focus. He didn't want confrontation. Not on a plane. Not in front of families. Not in a confined space. But sometimes, confrontation comes to you. Carl's voice grew louder. And you, he pointed at Stephen again. You think you're some tough guy? Sitting there with your sunglasses, acting like a silent hero. Stephen simply said, I'm minding my own business. Oh, I bet you are. Carl leaned closer, his breath heavy with alcohol. You look scared. Are you scared, old man? Stephen lifted his sunglasses just enough for Carl to see his eyes, steady, disciplined, unmoving. No, Stephen said softly. I'm not scared. That simple response annoyed Carl even more. It was the lack of fear that bothered him. He thrived on intimidation. He wanted people to react, to panic, to give him control. But Steven Seagal was not someone easily shaken. The plane began taxiing, and the seatbelt signs illuminated. Passengers clipped their belts quickly, but Carl remained standing in the aisle, refusing to sit. The flight attendant came rushing over. Sir, please sit down immediately. We cannot take off unless all passengers are seated. Carl jabbed a finger towards Stephen again. I'll sit down when he stops staring at me. Stephen hadn't moved a muscle. The attendant's tone turned firm. Sir, this is your final warning. Oh, final warning? Carl scoffed. What are you going to do? Kick me off? The doors closed. Plane's moving. Too late. A ripple of nervous laughter ran through the cabin, not because anything was funny, but because tension needed somewhere to escape. Stephen finally spoke, quietly but clearly. Sir, please sit down. You're making things harder for everyone. Carl clenched his fists. Don't tell me what to do. The engines grew louder. The plane was seconds from takeoff. Stephen's voice remained calm. We should all follow instructions. It's safer for everyone. Carl whipped his head around in fury. Shut your mouth. His shout echoed through the cabin, causing a baby to cry. The mother glared at him, terrified. Carl smirked. Oh, look, I scared a baby. Tell your husband to fight me. A wave of disgust rolled through the passengers. Stephen moved slightly, shifting his posture, ready to intervene if the situation escalated. And it did. Carl shoved the flight attendant aside and pointed directly in Stephen's face. You think you're better than everyone. You think you can talk down to me. Stephen didn't react. He didn't blink. Carl took that as disrespect. His voice boomed. I will put you in your place. Passengers gasped. Several phones rose into the air to record. The plane shook as it increased speed on the runway. And in the middle of this chaos, Stephen remained unmoved, calm in the face of fury. But the rude passenger didn't understand who he was dealing with, or what was about to happen next. The plane thundered down the runway, wheels rumbling beneath the cabin floor. Passengers clutched their armrests, not because of the takeoff, but because Carl, the raging passenger, was still standing in the aisle, red-faced and trembling with anger. The flight attendant, shaken by his shove, raised her hands defensively. Sir, please take your seat. But Carl ignored her completely. His eyes were locked on Steven Seagal, who sat still, patient, composed, a rock in a storm. The engines roared louder as the plane lifted off the ground. The cabin tilted upward. Still, Carl remained on his feet, swaying dangerously. Sit down, another passenger shouted. You're gonna fall. Carl snapped back. Shut up. All of you. The man looked drunk, furious, and unhinged, a dangerous combination at 30,000 feet. Stephen finally spoke a single, steady sentence. Sir, this is not the time. Carl sneered. Oh, you think you get to tell me when the time is? The plane ascended sharply, and Carl stumbled forward, bracing himself on Stephen's seat. His face ended up inches away from Stephen's. You got something to say, old man? Say it. Stephen didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't move. There is nothing to say, he replied calmly. Sit down before someone gets hurt. Carl's teeth clenched so hard his jaw twitched. He hated calm people. He hated being ignored. And more than anything, he hated feeling powerless. You think you're tough just because you sit still? Carl spat. You're scared. That's why you're quiet. Stephen's silence was the answer. Carl wasn't done. You know what your problem is? Carl hissed. You think you're better than me. You think you're the hero of this story. Stephen sighed gently. I'm just a man trying to fly in peace. That simple line made Carl explode. Well, guess what? He shouted. Today, I decide who gets peace. He suddenly swung his arm, knocking a cup of water out of a passenger's hand. People gasped. A toddler began bawling. The mother shielded her child, yelling, Stop it. Please. Carl turned toward her, smirking. Ah, baby crying? Maybe Stephen here can save you. Stephen slowly stood up from his seat. Not abruptly, not aggressively. He rose with the quiet gentleness of someone who knew exactly how strong he was and didn't need to prove it. His height, his presence, his grounded stance instantly shifted the energy in the cabin. Even Carl felt it. What? Carl barked, trying to maintain dominance. You want to fight now? Huh. He pushed Stephen's shoulder. Come on. Hit me. Hit me. Stephen spoke with the calm of a monk. No. Passengers whispered. Is he serious? He's not scared at all. That dude's gonna learn a lesson today. Carl shoved again, harder. Fight me, coward. Stephen didn't budge, not even an inch. To Carl, it felt like pushing a mountain. I'm giving you a chance to sit down, Stephen said. Oh, shut your mouth. Carl snapped, spraying spit. You don't get to give me anything. He was losing control. His voice cracked with rage. His fists tightened. His eyes turned wild. And that's when everything escalated. Carl suddenly grabbed a can of soda off the drink cart and hurled it across the aisle. It hit a teenage boy on the shoulder. The boy yelped. The crowd erupted. Hey, what's wrong with you? Stop this now. A man in row 14 stood. You do that again, I'll. Carl turned on him. You'll what? Huh. He lunged toward the man, but the plane jolted from mild turbulence, throwing Carl off balance. He stumbled backward, directly toward Stephen. Before he could fall, Stephen reached out an arm, not to strike, but to catch him, preventing him from crashing into the seats. It was pure instinct. Mercy, even in chaos. But Carl misinterpreted it. He snarled, ripped his arm free, and roared. Don't touch me. He lifted his fist. The passengers screamed. Oh my God, he's gonna hit him. Somebody stop him. But Stephen didn't step back. He didn't raise his arms. He didn't brace for impact. He simply looked at Carl with a calm expression that said, without words, This will not go the way you think. Carl staggered, preparing to swing again. A passenger began filming. Another whispered loudly, He's insane. He's attacking a random guy. But before anyone realized it, before Carl understood it, before the situation completely detonated, Stephen shifted his stance ever so slightly. It was subtle, quiet, controlled, and it was the first sign that Carl was about to learn exactly who he was dealing with. The cabin vibrated with a low hum as the plane continued its climb. But inside, the atmosphere was sharp, tense, and electric, the kind of silence that comes right before a storm breaks. Carl, still swaying with drunken aggression, raised his fist again. His knuckles were white. His breathing was ragged. His mind was too far gone to understand what he was stepping into. Stephen exhaled softly. Not fear, not frustration, just patience running out. Before Carl could swing, a woman in the back cried out, Somebody do something. Carl laughed. I'm doing something, sweetheart. He lunged, or tried to, because Carl's lunge was more like a messy, off-balance stumble, the kind of movement that telegraphed itself a mile away. But to him, it felt like a full, powerful attack. And that's when Stephen moved. Not fast, not dramatically, just precise. In a single controlled motion, he turned his body slightly, raised one hand, and redirected Carl's arm with the gentlest touch, So subtle, it looked like Stephen simply brushed lint off Carl's sleeve. Carl's fist missed by a full foot. He spun past Stephen, losing balance. Passengers gasped. What just happened? Did he even touch him? Bro didn't even try. Carl staggered and slammed into an empty seat, nearly knocking himself out. But embarrassment lit the anger inside him like gasoline. You did that, he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Stephen. You think you're smart? Think you can embarrass me? Stephen shook his head. This isn't about embarrassment. It's about safety. Sit down, before this gets worse. Carl roared. I'm not sitting anywhere. He charged again, this time trying to tackle Stephen with all his weight. This was worse. Much worse. But Stephen didn't panic. He didn't brace. He didn't even widen his stance. He simply shifted his center of gravity, one foot sliding back, grounding himself like a tree with roots deep in the earth. Carl hit him. Or rather, Carl hit a wall. The thud was loud, a hollow, painful sound. Carl bounced off Stephen's body as though he'd run into a metal pole disguised as a human. His arms flailed. His head snapped back. He stumbled to his knees. A passenger muttered, "Oh, that's gotta hurt." Another whispered, "He picked the wrong dude." The flight attendant, still trembling from earlier, stepped forward. "Sir, please stop. This is your last warning." Carl ignored her completely. He pushed himself up using the armrest, face red, sweat dripping down his forehead. He pointed at Stephen, shaking with fury. "Why are you just standing there?" "Fight back," Stephen replied softly. "Why would I fight someone who can't even stand?" That line broke Carl. Like glass. He roared and grabbed a metal water bottle out of the seat pocket and lifted it like a weapon. Passengers screamed. "Hey, stop. Oh my God, he's swinging that thing." Carl lunged again, this time bringing the bottle down in a sloppy, violent arc aimed directly at Stephen's head. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Except Stephen. He moved like water. His hand rose, palm open. He caught Carl's wrist mid-swing. Not with force, but with control. The entire plane went quiet. Carl's arm froze in the air, completely stuck. He stared at Stephen, stunned. What are you doing? Let go." Stephen didn't tighten his grip. He didn't squeeze. He simply held Carl's wrist like a parent stopping a child from touching a hot stove. But Carl couldn't move. Not an inch. "What is this?" Carl shouted, panicking now. "Let go of me." Stephen met his eyes. For the first time, there was firmness behind the calm. "No." He stepped forward, guiding Carl's arm down effortlessly, forcing him to drop the bottle. It clattered to the floor. Then, with a gentle twist of Carl's wrist, not enough to break, not enough to injure, just enough to control, Stephen lowered Carl to one knee. The passengers gasped again. He's controlling him. That's martial arts, bro. Holy, he's not even trying." Carl struggled wildly, but it didn't matter. Stephen had complete control with only one hand. "I advised you to sit down earlier," Stephen said quietly. "This is me helping you sit." He pressed downward. Carl collapsed into the aisle, seated in the most humiliating position possible. Legs splayed, back slumped, one arm pinned harmlessly. The passengers clapped. A few cheered. One guy whispered, "This is better than a movie." Carl, humiliated and breathless, barked, You think this is over?" Stephen released his arm and stood. "It can be," he replied calmly, "if you stop." But Carl didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Something in him, pride, rage, or drunken stupidity, wouldn't let him. He let out a guttural yell and tried to stand again. Stephen watched him struggle, almost with sadness. Passengers held their breath. Everyone knew. The next move Carl made would decide what happened to him. And for the first time, Stephen looked ready to end it. The cabin felt frozen in time. Every pair of eyes was locked on Carl, who was still on the floor, panting like a cornered animal. His hair clung to his sweaty forehead, his shirt stuck to his back, and his pride, the only thing he had left, was hanging by a thread. Stephen stood in front of him, calm, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady. Not triumphant, Not aggressive, just present. A pillar of stability while Carl crumbled like wet sand. Don't get up again, Stephen said softly. But soft didn't mean weak. The tone hit Carl harder than any punch could have. Carl wobbled to one knee, clinging to the seat for support. His voice cracked. I'm not scared of you. Stephen tilted his head. You should be scared of your own decisions, not me. Passengers murmured. He's done. This guy needs to quit. How is he still trying? Carl dragged himself upright, swaying like a drunk at closing time. His chest heaved, his fists curled. But anyone watching could see. Not even he believed he could win anymore. Still, pride is a dangerous fuel. You embarrassed me, Carl spat. In front of everyone. You think you can just control me. Stephen remained silent. That silence burned Carl's ego more than any insult could have. He stepped forward, sloppy but determined, and threw a wild haymaker directly at Stephen's jaw. Passengers gasped. The biggest, hardest punch yet. And Stephen moved a single inch. 1 inch. A lean of the head. A shift of the chin. The punch missed entirely, slicing through empty air. Carl's momentum carried him forward again, right into Stephen's waiting hand. Stephen placed 2 fingers, on Carl's shoulder and redirected him like he was rearranging furniture. Carl stumbled sideways and crashed into the window seat, the impact rattling the tray table. Why won't you fight me? Carl screamed. Stephen finally spoke. Because you can't handle what a real fight looks like. Those words pierced deeper than a blade. Carl trembled with rage. You think you're better than me? Stephen took one slow step forward. The tension snapped tight. No, he said calmly. I don't think so. Passengers whispered, oh my God. That line was lethal. He's destroying him mentally now. Carl launched again, a wild, desperate tackle, arms spread, legs shaky. Stephen caught him mid-charge. With one arm. Just one. He wrapped around Carl's shoulder like guiding a child crossing the street and used Carl's own momentum to pivot him downward. Carl fell face first into the aisle. A painful thud. A groan. Silence. Stephen knelt beside him, not in aggression, but almost like a disappointed teacher kneeling near a stubborn student. Listen to me, Stephen said, voice low but firm. This ends now. Carl flinched. Don't touch me. Stephen didn't. He simply placed a hand in front of Carl's face, palm open, showing he wasn't trying to hurt him. That's the difference between us, Stephen said. You attack because you're angry. I respond with control. Carl blinked, confused, defeated, exhausted. You wanted to fight a stranger on a plane, Stephen continued. You chose violence. I chose restraint. And restraint will always win. Carl swallowed hard. His eyes glistened, not from pain, but humiliation. Passengers began murmuring with sympathy. Man, this is sad. He brought this on himself. He should just stay down. Carl pushed himself up weakly. You don't know me. Stephen stood and stepped back, giving him space. You're right, Stephen said. I don't. He nodded toward the empty seat beside Carl. But you should sit. Before you do something you'll regret for the rest of your life. Carl wiped his face, hands shaking. You think you can tell me what to do? Stephen's voice didn't rise, didn't harden. It just sharpened, like a sword finally being unsheathed. I'm not telling you, he said. I'm warning you. And something about the word warning hit Carl differently. Maybe it was the tone. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the realization that he couldn't win. But Carl froze. For the first time since the incident began, he hesitated. A full 10 seconds passed. No one breathed. Then slowly, Carl lowered himself into the seat. Defeated, deflated, broken. A wave of relief swept through the cabin. Some passengers applauded weakly. Others sighed. A few even whispered prayers of gratitude that the madness was finally over. The flight attendant stepped in cautiously. Sir, thank you for cooperating. Carl didn't look at her. He stared at the floor. The fight was gone. Stephen gave a final nod. Good choice. He turned and started walking back to his seat. But Stephen didn't know yet. Someone in the cabin had recognized him. Someone who knew exactly who he was. And in a few minutes, his identity would change everything. For a moment, the cabin returned to something almost close to normal. Passengers whispered in relief. The flight attendants took deep breaths, and the engines hummed steadily beneath the floor. Stephen quietly stepped back into his row, lowering himself into his seat as if nothing extraordinary had happened. He adjusted his jacket sleeve. He exhaled. Peace restored. But peace wasn't done with him yet. Across the aisle, an elderly man wearing reading glasses and a faded blue cap stared at Stephen with a puzzled expression. His eyes narrowed, widened, then narrowed again. Finally, he whispered to his wife, louder than he meant to. "I swear, that's Steven Seagal." His wife gasped. "The actor." "The martial artist," he corrected. "Lawman, Aikido master. That's Steven Seagal." The whisper spread like wildfire. Passengers leaned into the aisle. Necks stretched. Eyes widened. "That's him. No way. Bro, now it makes sense why he handled that dude like nothing. Wait, is this real?" A teenager 3 rows back lifted his phone. "Guys, I'm telling you, that's Steven Seagal. I've watched all his movies. Nobody moves like that except him." More heads turned. You could practically feel the realization ripple through the cabin. Stephen remained calm, quiet, unfazed. But Carl froze. His head jerked up at the sound of the name. His eyes darted around wildly until they landed on Stephen, the man he had spent the last 20 minutes trying to fight. His face lost all color. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The teenager stood up slightly. "Sir, are you Steven Seagal?" Stephen sighed. He lifted his sunglasses just enough for the cabin to see his eyes. Calm, sharp, unmistakable. The cabin erupted. "That's him. No freaking way. I knew it. Legend. Aikido master on a plane, bro." Even the flight attendant's jaw dropped. "Sir, Mr. Seagal, we had no idea." Stephen gave a polite nod. "I was hoping to keep a low profile." Carl felt every pair of eyes turn toward him. Mockery, judgment, disbelief. A passenger called out, "Bro, you tried to fight Steven Seagal?" Another laughed. "Man picked the worst possible person." Someone else added, "He didn't even lay a finger on you, and you still lost." Carl's humiliation deepened. He pressed his palms to his forehead, elbows on his knees, hiding from the world. But shame wasn't done with him either. A second flight attendant, a senior officer this time, hurried down the aisle. "We received a cockpit call about a disruptive passenger. Is everything under control?" The younger attendant pointed at Carl instantly. "Yes, this is the man who assaulted passengers and tried to attack Mr. Seagal." The senior officer's eyes widened. "The Steven Seagal?" Stephen nodded politely. Carl groaned. "Please don't." The senior officer knelt beside Carl, voice firm. "Sir, you will remain seated for the rest of this flight. Upon landing, airport security will take over." Passengers applauded. Carl grasped the seat in front of him. "Wait, I didn't know who he was." Stephen responded before anyone else could. "This isn't about who I am," he said calmly. "It's about how you treated people." The words hit harder than any strike could. The officer straightened. "Sir, it's fortunate Mr. Seagal restrained you safely. This could have escalated much worse." Passengers nodded, murmuring agreement. Stephen continued, voice steady but stern. "You disrespected the crew. You threatened innocent people. You chose violence. Identity doesn't excuse behavior." Carl's eyes welled up. "I was drunk. I wasn't thinking." "That's the problem," Stephen said. "You let anger think for you." Passengers grew silent. Every word felt like a lesson, a warning, a truth sinking deep into the man who moments ago thought he was in control. The senior officer placed a hand on Carl's shoulder. "Sir, remain calm. We'll deal with this properly." Carl sat back, defeated, unable to even lift his head. Meanwhile, passengers began thanking Stephen one by one. "Sir, you saved us. You handled that like a pro. I was scared for my kids." "Respect, Mr. Seagal." Stephen nodded gently. I'm glad no one was hurt. That's what matters. A little girl across the aisle waved shyly. Mr. Superhero? Steven smiled warmly. Not a superhero, just someone trying to do the right thing. The cabin softened with laughter. But the man who had started all the chaos sat silently, staring at the floor, drowning in the weight of his actions, and the weight of discovering he had challenged a living legend. And the world didn't know it yet. But cameras had been recording the entire time. One video was already uploading, and within minutes, the story of Steven Seagal stopping a violent passenger mid-flight would explode across the internet. By the time Flight 782 touched down, the world outside the cabin had already shifted. Half the passengers had posted clips. Hashtags were forming. Comments were flooding in. But inside the aircraft, the silence before landing was thick. Carl remained slumped in his seat, eyes puffy, shame weighing on him like a metal anchor. The once aggressive, loud, out-of-control man now looked small, almost unrecognizable. As the plane taxied to a stop, the captain made an announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated. We have security personnel waiting at the gate. A ripple of whispers spread through the cabin. He's done. Hope he learns from this. I still can't believe Steven Seagal was on this plane. When the seatbelt signs went off, 2 airport security officers boarded immediately. They approached Carl, who didn't argue, didn't yell, didn't resist. He stood with the heaviness of someone who'd already accepted defeat. But before they escorted him out, something unexpected happened. Carl turned to Steven, eyes swollen, voice trembling. I'm sorry, he whispered, barely audible. I messed up. I hurt people. And you didn't even fight back. Steven looked at him with the calmness he had shown from the beginning. You have a choice now, Steven said. Learn from this, or repeat it. One path leads to regret. The other leads to growth. Carl swallowed, nodded slowly, then allowed security to guide him off the plane. No anger, no pride, just silence. As soon as he was gone, the cabin erupted into applause, a release of all the tension that had built up during the flight. Passengers gathered around Steven before he could even stand. Sir, thank you for protecting us. You handled him like a true master. My kids feel safe because of you. You didn't hurt him. That's real strength. Steven simply raised a hand for quiet. You all stayed calm under pressure. That's what made this safe. A flight attendant, still shaken but smiling now, said, I've worked for 12 years, and I've never seen someone show that level of control. Steven nodded. Violence isn't strength. Discipline is. Those words stuck with everyone. When he finally stepped off the plane, the terminal was buzzing. Phones out. People pointing. Some cheering. Others stunned into silence. News reporters were already waiting near the arrival gate. Mr. Seagal, can you tell us what happened? Is it true you stopped a violent passenger without using force? How did you stay so calm? Steven held up both hands. The flight crew did their job. The passengers stayed brave. I just did what needed to be done. He didn't boast, didn't brag, didn't take credit. He simply walked forward, disappearing into the terminal like a shadow slipping back into the world. The viral wave. Within hours, the video hit over 20 million views. Comments filled social media. This is real martial arts. Respect to Steven Seagal for choosing restraint over violence. That drunk guy learned a lifetime lesson in 20 minutes. Legend moves like a ghost. Strength isn't about hurting people. It's about controlling yourself. Clips replayed Steven's subtle movements, his calm redirection, the effortless way he neutralized chaos without harming anyone. Martial arts instructors worldwide praised him for showing the true purpose of discipline. News networks ran the story for days. Steven Seagal de-escalates violent passenger on plane without throwing a single punch. A masterclass in control, how Seagal prevented a mid-air disaster. Even people who weren't fans suddenly respected him deeply. And Carl, he became a symbol, not of shame, but of change. A week later, he issued a public apology. I was drunk, angry, and wrong. Steven Seagal didn't humiliate me. He taught me something. I'm working on becoming a better person. The internet forgave him. Because the lesson wasn't about punishment. It was about transformation.